Hello and welcome back to Cargo Cafe. As always, I'm your host, Libby Hausman. Super excited to be joined today with Jay Devers, the president of Bestway International. We are very happy to have you. How are you, Jay?
I'm good. Thank you, Libby. I'm thrilled to be here on Cargo Cafe. Finally, I've waited my turn patiently.
Well, actually, you were our very first ever Cargo Cafe guest. And I'd have to go back and check, but I think it was October of last year. So we've made it a year in.
We made it.
We
Congratulations.
did it. We're still doing it. Yes.
Good
it
job
should be good.
to you, Libby.
And hopefully here we are a year later and we're just keep bringing on better and better guests and we're super excited to dive in. So today we actually have the honor of sitting with Drew Felling with Commerce Bank. He's going to be out here in just a couple minutes. We're going to be talking all things export financing, letters of credit, all that good stuff. But before we jump into that, I know everyone is just dying to keep talking about tariffs. So I'm going to pass it over to Jay and give just a little update on our ongoing tariff situation.
Yeah, super brief update on the tariff situation. We all know, I think the Supreme Court very shortly will hear the cases regarding the legality of the IEEPA tariffs. I believe that's November 5th, last time I checked, but that's always subject to change. And then the decision is expected within, about a month of that. Within the last 10 days or so, there's been some threats of 100% tariffs on everything Chinese origin, and that's softened a little bit, probably some posturing at this point in time. And there's an update expected a little bit later in the month of October. So that is today's tariff update. Stay tuned for another one tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say it could change by the end of our show today,
That's right.
But we're not actually here to talk about tariffs just yet, maybe a little bit later in the year as we get through some of these big decision points. But today we're actually going to be talking about export financing and all things that kind of go along associated with that. We have a great guest that we're super excited to bring out. We have Drew Felling from Commerce Bank. Drew is a certified global business professional with more than 30 years of international experience in export sales, logistics, trade payment, and finance services. With proven success in assisting exporting and importing companies in growing their international business, Drew works with the bank's commercial relationship officers in Western Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, and Colorado. Service offerings include letters of credit, documentary collections, and export working capital loans. He also serves as a chair for the Mid-America District Export Council. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and bring Drew out.
Great. Thanks very much, Libby. Thank you and Jay for having me on today. I'm excited to be sharing information with you all. But before we get started, I did want to mention an event that's coming up that I want all of our viewers to be aware of. We're going to have an export letter of credit seminar on October 28th, held at Union Station from 9 to 1, lunch included for $100. And it is sponsored by the Kansas City World Trade Center, Commerce Bank, and the Mid-America District Export Council. And the presenters will be myself and Brian Gordon, Senior VP of International Trade for Commerce. And then we're going to have Jennifer Allenbaugh, our Letter of Credit Operations Supervisor, there as well. So you can sign up via the Kansas City World Trade Center event page. So please join us for that event. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, so that's 2 Tuesdays from now. We're super excited. That should be a really awesome event. I'm going to make sure that we include a registration link in the comments after this, as well as sending that out to all of our viewers. The link, I believe, is already on the Bestway LinkedIn page, so if you want to just go there, it's a good way to find it and register, but we're super excited, and that should be a really awesome event. Yeah. So, Drew, let's get into it. So let's start with the kind of the basics, the export financing basics. For companies that are new to exporting, the term kind of export financing can sound intimidating. How do you explain what that really means in simpler terms?
So export financing is basically, commercial banks, commercial lending banks providing funds to exporters so they can either build the products to export or to buy supplies in order to build those products. So it can also give foreign buyers terms in a version of exporting. For example, an exporter can tell the buyer, I'll give you 180 days before you have to release payment. And therefore, the buyer is getting the opportunity to delay payment before they actually have to, so they can on-sell the product perhaps before they have to release payment back to the seller. And, we also, you can use foreign receivables as collateral for an export working capital loan. And we'll get into that later about the difference between domestic loans and international loans and so forth.
Yeah, so then what would you say are the most common challengers exporters face when it comes to like getting paid by their international customers?
So, cash is king. If you can get it in advance, great, go for it. But that's not always the case. And, in the global economy right now, there's a lot of issues with trust. And so I think we're seeing a resurgence of letters of credit coming back into play because it's protecting and helping mitigate risk for both the buyer and the seller. So I think that's something that, they need to take into consideration when they're working with that.
Yeah. So can you talk us through some of the tools available to help mitigate that risk?
Sure. I think we have a slide that I'll put up. You may not be able to read it, but I'll explain it to everybody, and then we make it available later if you want it. But it's a So this is payment terms on a scale of risk. And so we talked about, cash in advance, which is the best scenario for an exporter, worst case scenario for the buyer. And at the other end of that spectrum, it's open account, where the seller is giving open account terms to the buyer, great for the buyer, but worrisome for the exporter. And then in between those, to help mitigate risk, are trade finance tools, letters of credit, and documentary collections. So in addition to that, let's see, what number are we on? Payment terms, yeah. So, and then if you are giving open account, then you want to look into trade credit insurance to help protect those foreign receivables. And we'll talk more about that later on, how you can get trade credit insurance.
Yeah, and we're going to share that graphic that was just up on the screen with all of our viewers as well. It's a super helpful tool, kind of just explaining the payment terms and how the risks are associated with that. So if you weren't able to catch that, don't worry, we will share that graphic as well.
So Drew, before we jump into letters of credit, I just want to say thank you for everything you do to support the trade community in the Midwest. I don't think there's a harder working team than you and Brian and the smart folks that you have down there, just making it happen and driving international trade. And I think it's something to be extremely proud of. And we're obviously proud to have you here today.
Great. So thank you very much. That leads me to, let me do a quick plug for the event, the group that you and I are on, Jay, because I didn't really explain what the Mid-America District Export Council is.
Right.
It's a group of 22 professionals that supports the U.S. Commercial Service Office in the Kansas City area for Western Missouri and all of Kansas. And we are either exporters or subject matter experts with volunteer our time to help companies learn how to export and grow their exports. So, we're all welcome. We're all interested in helping. So you can reach out to any of us and we're going to be able to provide you with resources. So that's what the District Export Council is. And Jay's one of my fellow members.
Well, thank you for that, Drew. It's really an honor to be a part of the Export Council. I can't believe my background check went through for that. So I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Good segue. Nice plug.
That's right.
Yeah.
So back to the matter at hand. So letters of credit. I agree with you that seemed to go away for a little while, and it seems to be making a comeback. But just to kind of start us off with letters of credit, can you break that down into what a letter of credit is or an LC is in plain English?
Sure. So instead of the buyer and seller who are maybe not know each other and they're concerned about, are you going to ship? Are you going to pay me? A letter of credit moves the risk up to the buyer and seller's banks who do know each other and can authenticate the export letter of credit coming in and help the exporter understand what they need to do in order to get paid, and also assure the foreign buyer that the goods are going to be shipped and they'll get the bill of lading before they have to release payment. So it's a great tool to help companies who may not know each other yet. It may not always be a great need for it, but when there is, it's very helpful. And it spells out who gets paid and what to do to get paid. The documentation, you follow those steps. And if you align yourself with an international bank and an international freight forwarder, they're going to help you understand this process and control the process. So it's not the difficult situation you may have experienced in the past when you had nobody helping you.
Yeah, so would you say that it's safe to say here that the introduction of the two banks really is the mediation and what provides protection for both the buyer and the seller in the transaction?
Yeah, I think that's true, because right now Commerce Bank has about 350 correspondent bank partners around the world. So when the buyer goes to their bank and asks them to issue a letter of credit so the exporter can get paid, then that bank is sending a SWIFT message to Commerce Bank or any of their correspondent bank partners in the United States. And SWIFT message is an acronym that stands for Society of Worldwide Interbanking Financial Telecommunications. It is actually the most successful volunteer organization in the world. All banks participated. They each have a SWIFT code. And so when we get that SWIFT message coming in and it shows that number, I know that's Deutsche Bank in Frankfurt, and not somebody in their living room telling me that they're Deutsche Bank in Frankfurt. And so, and they know they're sending it to us. And then we know the credit ratings on those banks. And then we're telling the exporter, listen, this is a top rated bank. You don't need to worry about getting paid. It's going to happen. Just follow the rules, do what you need to do, and you're going to get paid.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the rules there, Drew, because that really is what sticks with me when I think about letters of credit. Whether you're an experienced exporter or maybe you're a new exporter or an aspiring exporter, not expiring, we don't want them to expire. What is the process to kick off a letter of credit? Is that something that they would include in their sales cycle, or is that something that they would engage their bank and have the bank engage another bank? I mean, how does this process begin?
That's exactly right. In the last 12 years that I've been working with Commerce Bank, I've been working with the bankers who work with the finance folks. But finance folks, may not want to use a letter of credit, and they don't want to give terms, and they want cash in advance. So educating the salespeople about the benefits of a letter of credit is going to help them win more sales by using that as a negotiation tool. So educating the exporters about this process, and when they're quoting someone, go ahead and send them the instruction template that you get from your bank saying, here's how I want your letter of credit to be written. Here's the bank I want you to have it routed to. And I want you to work up a draft with your bank and email it to the exporter so he can review that before it's issued and eliminate a lot of the problems that happen after the fact. I found most people don't realize they can control the process. A lot of times the exporter's like, okay, you're paying me via letter of credit. Then next month they get a call from a bank in the East Coast saying, hey, we have this letter of credit for you, and why don't you let us process it for you since we have the documents and ready to go. But the problem is that bank is not working for the exporter. He really is kind of working for the importer on the other side. So, that's where you want your bank to be advising you on the letter of credit. And you can dictate that ahead of time by telling them, route it through this bank. So, and you can eliminate upstream fees and other issues when you're waiting for another bank to process.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I heard a little bit of the Commerce Bank sales pitch in there, which is a good one. You mentioned driving sales or growing sales or growing into new markets. Drew, tell me how people can look at a letter of credit less as a tool and more as an enabler of how to create new business and drive more sales.
So term letters of credit are an opportunity to say, Mr. Buyer, if I were to give you extra terms before you have to release payment to me, anywhere from 30 days to 360 days, we did one in Turkey one time for 360 days, would you buy more of my product or would you buy more often? And the answer is typically yes, they would. So, it's getting that off of the terms. And then, of course, the next question I always hear is from the finance folks. Drew, I can't wait 180 days, to get payment. I've got to pay my suppliers. I've got to pay my employees. Well, this is not a benefit to us. And then we say, well, it can be, because you can ask the bank to discount that letter of credit for a fee. and basically advance payments to the exporter maybe 3 weeks after shipment. And then the bank is waiting for the final payment from the buyer's bank. And what's nice about that is if you're negotiating the deal up front, you can contact your bank and say, what's that fee? And we base that fee on the country risk, the bank rating, the dollar amount, the length of time. And then we'll say, you know what, for 90 days, it's going to be X amount of dollars. Quote that to your foreign buyer and say, here's the price to get 90 days. And often those buyers are willing to pay that because it's a fraction of what they would pay their in-country bank to get those terms. So having that knowledge and using that up front during the sales process is how my exporters are growing their global sales.
Terrific. Well, that makes a ton of sense. Let's talk about potential downside before we get off of letters of credit. Let's talk about a couple of the potential risks. Can you think of any situations where an LC might not be a good idea for an exporter?
Sure. Let's say, if it's low value, I would say maybe if you want a rule of thumb, if it's less than $50,000, you may not want to go to the trouble of a letter of credit because the buyer is going to pay a percentage of that dollar amount to his bank in order to get that issued. Not many fees involved on the exporter side, but it adds to the cost of the deal. So that's one thing I would say this is a negative, and you would not want to do that. But also, what if the buyer's credit is good? You've done your research, you have a report, and you can work out a deal where he gives you a down payment, and then the balance is on open account. Or what if you have long-term standing dealers and distributors that you trust? There's no point in using a letter of credit with those guys. Just send it on open account. And then, of course, I think air freight shipments don't make sense for letters of credit. I mean, they're already there before we even started doing the documentation. So it's pretty much ocean freight.
Yeah, that's great. Are you seeing any mistakes being made by exporters using LCs at this point in time?
Yeah, I think we often are seeing that they don't have all the documents. The letter of credit is going to spell out all the documents that you need to produce and send to your bank for them to send them to the foreign bank in order to get paid. But you may not know that you have to get the certificate of origin, issued by the Kansas City World Trade Center, or you need a fumigation certificate, or you need a copy of the insurance policy. So often we're finding, people will send in the documents when we're like, well, where's your insurance certificate? So knowing what those documents are up front and having a plan for who's developing those documents for you. Sometimes it's your in-house staff, sometimes it's your freight forwarder, and, or it could be a third-party company that's helping you get those together. So that's one challenge they run into. Another one is missing the ship date, late shipment. The letter of credit says you have to ship by this date and you have to present documents by this date. And if you don't do that, it can void the letter of credit. So you often would have to get an amendment and pay the amendment fee, or buyer pay the amendment fee in order to get that changed to a later ship date. So being sure you follow that and know that up front. That's why we tell our exporters, send a copy of that letter of credit to your freight forwarder and have them review it with you before it's issued to make sure that they can get it to the dock or the port or the ship before that date. And what's the sailing, schedule? So it's great for the more eyes you have on that, the better off you're going to be. And then, late document presentation. You got 21 days to present. If you present late, that's going to be an issue also. But how you can avoid these, give instructions to the foreign buyer, request a draft for review, and ensure you have a plan for those documents.
That's great, Drew. Libby's going to ask you a little bit about working capital loans as the next kind of method, but I would add to your point that you made right there from an Incoterm standpoint is if a letter of credit is involved or any other documentary collection method, as the exporter, you're going to want to control those documents. You're not going to want those documents under control.
And that's a good point because a lot of U.S. companies are selling on the Guesswork Incoterm. And if you're using a letter of credit, you need that bill of lading from the freight forwarder. and it's most likely the buyer's freight forwarder on a west or east coast, and then he has no impetus to get you that bill of lading. So that's where we encourage our exporters to sell CIP or CIF, cost insurance and freight foreign port. So they're controlling it. It's their freight forwarder. It's their insurance, and they know they're going to get that bill of lading needed to get paid.
Yep. Great.
Kind of helps.
Right.
I work for.
We talk all the time, supply chain, many hands.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. It's like I was saying, many hands work on one shipment. Just making sure everybody's on the same page and has the correct documentation is a huge part of it. So we've talked on letters of credit, kind of moving into some other aspects of it. Export working capital loans. What makes an export working capital loan different from just, your standard business loan?
So export working capital provides funds to build or purchase supplies, and it is restricted to export capabilities. You can't use it, to buy something to sell to your domestic partners. It's restricted to export funding for exports. And you can use foreign receivables covered by a letter of credit or trade credit insurance as loan collateral for an export working capital loan. But if you're a domestic lender and you want a domestic loan, those banks will not consider foreign receivables as collateral for those export working capital deals. They want just domestic collateral and domestic receivables for the standard loan. So that's primarily where we see the difference between a standard SBA loan and an export working capital loan.
Okay, so let's say that you've gotten to the point where you know that you need this kind of document. How do you evaluate whether a company is a candidate for this type of financing or not?
So do they have exports? Do they have export foreign receivables? That's the two primary things that I'm looking for. And then the rest of the vetting process, I'm going to rely on the commercial bankers to do their due diligence and make sure that the bank and the buyer are in agreement that this is a good deal for them to do.
So basically it's just, do you have exports and are you ready to go?
Right. Do you have foreign receivables? Yeah.
Right. So are there limits or restrictions companies should be aware of when they're applying for these working capital loans?
The maximum loan you can get from the SBA is $5 million. So, but with the XM Bank export working capital loans, there is no minimum, there is no maximum. So that's a great deal there. But funds, like I've said before, are restricted for export support. So you can't, build out, your trucking system with an export loan. Mm-hmm. And then, XM requires that goods made in the USA, and they want you to avoid selling to military organizations. And of course, we have restricted countries that we can't be doing business with. So that's another factor.
Great segue right there, right into XM. That's our next topic we want to talk about. A lot of confusion and controversy around XM, which is a shame, I think, considering what an incredible resource it is. But let's talk a minute about XM and the SBA guarantees that you mentioned a minute ago, Drew.
Yep.
For people that are not familiar with the Export-Import Bank, which is a division of the federal government, would you care to explain kind of what it is and how it's designed to support international trade?
Sure. So it's kind of a misnomer with the name Export-Import Bank of the United States, because they are not a bank and they do not do anything with imports. They're basically a federal agency that is an export credit agency. And so they're trying to support the exports of the United States and to grow those exports. If you look at the United States, we have one credit agency, XM Bank. China, for example, has 5 credit agencies out there helping their exporters grow their global sales. So, and the challenge with XM Bank is we have to get, approval from Congress every so many years for them to be in business. And I think we've had them in business for about 80 years. And, they have the export working capital loan program. They also have trade credit insurance against foreign receivables. And then there's foreign buyer financing. We are actually working on a couple of deals where we might, lend money to a company in Nigeria who's buying exports from a company in Texas. So, and that would be XM offers 100% guarantee to bankers that do that deal. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. An interesting note about the XM Bank is that they're one of the few organizations that return money to the Treasury every year. I mean, I think in last year they did 80 million they brought back to the Treasury, and since 92 they've returned $9.7 billion back to the Treasury. So it's a good organization. We need to support it.
Exactly. And speaking of that, so safe to say Commerce Bank is a active partner with XM Bank?
Yes. Yep. We're active members with XM Bank and the SBA. We're a preferred lending program for the SBA, and we are an XM delegated authority. So basically, we're supporting their programs and holding their guarantees. Because if you think about it, the export working capital loan is guaranteeing the bank that if the buyer defaults, then XM and SBA will pay the bank. So it's an insurance policy to encourage us to lend money to exporters.
Well, on that note, we're all friends here in Cargill Cafe, right?
Of course.
I see on the attendee list a whole bunch of familiar names and faces. So thank you for taking time this morning to join us. Without naming any names, though, is there an example kind of top of mind, Drew, that you can think of where you guys have put together a financing package with XM Bank that created a big win or a big business result here in our region?
I think the example I want to give is for SBA because, honestly, most small to medium sized companies, can go up to 5 million, and that's good enough for them. So I had an exporter in Denver, Colorado, as part of my territory, and he was Ethiopian, but he went to the University of Denver, but he had contacts in the Ethiopian government, and he had an opportunity to bid on their airplane part orders. So in Ethiopia, the government controls the military airplanes as well as the civil airplanes. So if he could get the money to buy the original equipment products from the companies across the United States, send it to Denver, package it up, and send it to Ethiopia, then he would be paid a lot of money. And he's getting paid via a letter of credit. So what we did was we set up an export working capital loan guaranteed by the SBA to give him the funds needed to buy those products so he could win that deal. So I think a few years later, he became Exporter of the Year for the state of Colorado.
That's awesome.
That's great. So would you say that's a fantastic example too, by the way, Drew? You mentioned the $5 million limit. You mentioned SBA. Is there kind of a product or service that's oriented towards that lower end of the market that's not, 3 dozen Boeing aircraft or whatever, that's more of a deal that's in our stratosphere?
So I think, if I were to say what is, the product that most small exporters are using, as available to them from XM, it would probably be their trade credit insurance program. Mm-hmm. And that's, a guarantee against foreign receivables. If the buyer defaults and doesn't pay, you can file a claim with the XM Bank. And you can also go to a private insurance company to get trade credit insurance. But what's nice about the XM deal is that you can ship your goods and then file your claims and pay your premiums on the website in arrears. So it's not like you have to buy a huge premium up front from a private insurance company and then work against that for the rest of the year. So that's most often what I see as being used for small companies.
Right. That's a good place for a shameless plug for our friend David Clark at ARI Global, who's an incredible resource when it comes to credit insurance and also a fairly strong cigar aficionado last time I checked.
And David is also on the District Export Council with J&I. So
that's right.
Very valuable resource.
So you've got a small business out there, somebody that you run across or somebody that we meet at one of these events that's hesitant to look into one of these packages. I mean, what do you tell them to get them kind of to move a little bit?
There's a couple of statistics that we use that are pretty shocking. I mean, 97% of exporters are small to medium-sized companies. And 90% of XM's transactions are for small to medium-sized companies. Only the big transactions that XM approves makes the news. And that, of course, is a huge dollar amount. But the majority of the transactions they do benefit small and medium-sized companies. So, it's like Boeing gets a huge benefit from XM supporting the sale of their planes. But what I tell people is, if you think about it, it's not just Boeing that's benefiting from that. Boeing doesn't make anything. They go out to hundreds and hundreds of small and medium-sized companies and have them make it, and then they're assembling the planes. So all of those small to medium-sized companies are benefiting from those sales as well.
That's right. And if you are hanging out downtown Kansas City at the right time, you'll see a train come through with some unassembled planes on it, the way from Wichita to Seattle.
Great.
Fun fact.
I didn't know that. No.
Libby gets all these fun facts by hanging out with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not fun.
Yeah, they're very fun. I had a question come up when you were talking about that. You mentioned small to medium-sized businesses a couple times. What constitutes a small to medium-sized business? Like how big can you get before you're kind of out of that criteria? Just curious.
That's a good question. And what I say is I have a lot of resources available to me that are more subject matter experts on SBA, export working capital loans, or what's an SBA. I know there's parameters for number of people in the business. And,
right.
I think the amount of sales, but, Ryan Fritz is our in-house specialty lending expert on SBA. So I would say, let's get Ryan on the phone. And, but a lot of often, small businesses know if they're small business or not.
Right? Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. So kind of looking ahead and working towards the end of this, I'm going to stop for a moment and take a time to say, if you do have any questions for Drew or Jay and I, please drop those in the chat. We'll make sure that we touch on that here as we start to wrap up. But looking ahead, how do you see trends in global trade impacting the way businesses like Commerce Bank can support exporters in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mentioned it a little bit before, is that, we think there's going to be a resurgence of letter of credit use, based on the uncertainty and the lack of trust in the global trade community, probably tied to the tariffs that Jay's been talking about.
Right.
But banks are going to need to prioritize the digital innovation. Right now, all letters of credit and documentary collections are still on printed paper that have to be couriered from the exporter to the bank, from the bank to the foreign bank. And automation of that process is going to help a lot of companies in the future if we can get that to come to fruition. And enhanced risk management. There's so many rules and regulations when it comes to export compliance. And, knowing what those are and how to meet those is going to be, a good for banks to be doing that in the future. And, enhance, risk management as well. And then, find more customized, flexible solutions. Right now, you have this and you can use this. But what if the deal is outside that realm? Let's be open to thinking about that.
Yeah. So those are really great points. I think, embracing kind of automation, like you mentioned, it's kind of baffling to me that a lot of that is still done physical pen to paper, shipping that stuff around. So
we do still have a typewriter in the office.
That is also baffling to me.
Do you have a fax machine?
Technically, yes, but the typewriter is what gets most attention around here, especially when you hear somebody using it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely automation. I could imagine will be huge in the industry. What's one practical piece of advice you would give a business owner who's maybe listening today and curious about exporting but unsure kind of how to start?
I think a lot of companies don't realize that there are 25 international trade affiliated organizations in the Kansas City metro. And all of these organizations have resources to help exporters understand how to export and how to grow those global sales. So reaching out to any one of us, Jay, David Clark, myself, and any of the people that are involved with the World Trade Center, at the U.S. Commercial Service Office, Kansas Department of Commerce, Missouri Department of Economic Development, they know all about these organizations and can tap you into those. So that's what I'd say. Reach out and ask questions, and we'll help you.
Yeah, we hear kind of a similar sentiment echoed by all of our Cargo Cafe guests. And I think it just really proves that there's no shortage of resources out there. You just have to know who to talk to and where to look. But yeah, there's definitely just ask questions would be the biggest part. Lastly, kind of wrapping up here, if someone wants to learn more about export financing or connect with Commerce Bank, what is the best way to reach you?
I think you can share my email address, drew.felling@commercebank.com, and also my mobile number, 816-863-4905. And we will help you. And, if I don't know the answers, I probably know somebody who does.
Yes, that's a great sentiment. Yep, I will share your contact information with everyone who attended today. And if you have any further questions or want to get in touch with Drew, that'll be the best way to do it. I do have to make a little call out. Brian Gordon is in our chat a little bit, commenting on the sticker on the bottom of Jay's mug. He rocks it, always. I've never been in a meeting with Jay where someone doesn't comment on the sticker on the bottom of your mug.
Well, it's Cargo Cafe. I'm not a coffee drinker. I drink a lot of iced tea.
Yeah.
But, we're on these screens all the time, so I got to get a little plug in.
Yep. He has the Bestway sticker on the bottom and the side.
We got to live the brand here, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Brian
great.
Also, Brian's always giving me a hard time about something. But Brian makes a great point in the questions section where he says that the weak link right now in global trade is customs. And boy, is that a point right now with everything that's going on. This is going to go down as one of the most interesting years, I think, in international trade, the history of international trade. And be interesting to see what comes of it once things start to settle down, hopefully.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
And before we wrap up and maybe open up for questions, I just want to mention one more time, about the upcoming Export Letter of Credit Seminar. It's going to be held October 28th from 9 to 1. Lunch included at Union Station, $100. And this is a great opportunity to learn not only, how does a letter of credit work and how to control it, but also how to use it as a sales negotiation tool and, educate your exporting salespeople about the process as well. So we would like, exporters, finance folks will win you over. And Brian Gordon and I and Jennifer Ellenbaugh from the Letter of Credit Operations Supervisor at Commerce Bank will be presenting. And this event is sponsored by the Kansas City World Trade Center, Commerce Bank, and the Mid-America District Export Council. So please join us and sign up on the Union Station World Trade Center event page. And then I know Libby also has links that she's going to provide for this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to send that link out after this. The link is already on the Bestway LinkedIn page as well if you want to go check that event out. If you were listening today and, thought letters of credit were interesting or had some follow-up questions, this would be a really, really great place for you to go and get those answers.
Absolutely.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, if there are any last-minute questions, please feel free to leave those in the comments. We will make sure to address them. We have a couple more minutes here. So if you're, marinating on something and want to get an answer, this would be a great opportunity. Or, of course, we can always connect you with Drew afterwards and get you in touch with someone at Commerce Bank to answer all those questions.
I was just thinking that, a lot of us think of Commerce Bank as a great Kansas City institution, which it is. But my gosh, you and Brian are everywhere all the time. I mean, Brian mentioned that he's been in Texas. I know you've got stuff in Colorado. I think obviously Arkansas and Kansas are in there too. And seems like you guys are back and forth to the St. Louis office fairly regularly. I feel like I'm missing a state. Oh, it's Nebraska.
Yeah,
So-
Brian covers Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. So he's a part of the META group up in Omaha. But that's what we try and do. We connect with each one of our markets and reach out to those subject matter experts because, having them know what we're about and us knowing what they're about is going to be the benefit we can offer to the exporters. And the thing is, one last comment about that, Jay, thanks for the plug for us. But Commerce Bank can help exporters anywhere in the United States. We're it's a fee-based income and it's services offered. So you don't even have to bank with Commerce for me to help you with your export letters of credit.
Well, I tell you, and it's easy to plug Commerce Bank. we're so lucky to have you guys and the effort and energy you guys put into this. But, you know, it's just so far ahead of what's going on in other banks. I mean, there's no other way to put that. And so we're lucky to have you in our town and on our team, and really lucky to have you here this morning. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It was great talking to you all.
Yeah, absolutely. If we don't have any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a LinkedIn post promoting the event, the Letters of Credit event that Drew was mentioning, as well as send it out in an email to all of our attendees. We really hope to see some people there. Hopefully we have some Bestway representatives as well. And if you heard about it from Cargo Cafe, go ahead and go up to Drew and just let him know. That'd be great. Awesome.
That's awesome.
All right, well, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Next month, be sure to hop in for our next Cargo Cafe. We're going to be talking about foreign trade zones and getting into some of that. So really excited about it, and more to come there.
Great.
Fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Drew. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Good afternoon to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye-bye.
We kind of, the attendance kind of dropping off a little bit on the card.